What happens when those we trust with our children's futures betray that sacred trust in the most devastating ways? Today we delve into the darkest corners of America's educational system, where teachers, meant to nurture and protect, became predators hidden in plain sight. According to the U.S. Department of Education, cases of sexual misconduct by educators affect as many as 1 in 10 students during their school years, a statistic as shocking as it is heartbreaking. These aren't just isolated incidents. They represent systematic failures that leave lasting trauma. From classroom authority to prison cells, these are the stories that shattered communities and left us questioning the very institutions we rely on every day. After what prosecutors called one of the longest-running patterns of child sexual abuse in Cleveland history, dance teacher Terrence Green received a life sentence with the possibility of parole only after 365 years, effectively ensuring he would never leave prison. Over a horrifying 21-year period between 1998 and 2019, Green systematically raped 6 students and sexually assaulted 2 others, using his position as a celebrated dance instructor to select, groom, and silence victims. The investigation revealed how Green specifically targeted boys from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering free lessons and special performance opportunities before initiating abuse. He selected children whose economic circumstances and dreams of dance careers made them particularly vulnerable to manipulation, explained the lead detective. What allowed this abuse to continue for decades was Green's carefully cultivated community reputation. He regularly organized charity performances and received local awards for mentoring youth. During the emotional 7-week trial, now adult victims described how Green convinced them that sexual contact was necessary for physical development as dancers, and threatened to end their performance careers if they reported him. The judge, in delivering the unprecedented sentence, stated that Green had weaponized children's artistic dreams and trust in a mentor to perpetrate some of the most persistent abuse this court has encountered. How many other respected community figures are currently using their public reputations as shields while privately destroying young lives? In a case that garnered national headlines, Arizona teacher Brittany Zamora was sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by lifetime probation for sexually abusing her 13-year-old student. What began in a classroom text group escalated to Zamora sending explicit photos before orchestrating sexual encounters on school property, including during class while other students watched educational videos. Court records revealed Zamora manipulated the victim through a calculated grooming process, first establishing herself as a confidant before gradually normalizing sexual conversations. The abuse was discovered only after the victim's parents installed monitoring software on his phone and found disturbing messages. During her sentencing hearing, evidence emerged that school administrators had received previous warnings about Zamora's inappropriate behavior, but failed to take decisive action. There were multiple missed opportunities to protect this child, stated the prosecutor. In a particularly disturbing development reported by prison officials, Zamora has since taken on a teaching role within the correctional facility, instructing fellow inmates, a position that raised concerns given her history of exploiting educational settings. The victim's parents later filed a $2.5 million lawsuit against the school district, stating in court documents, "Our son was betrayed by someone he was taught to trust, while the adults responsible for his safety looked the other way." How many warning signs must appear before educational institutions prioritize student safety over avoiding scandal? In a case that shocked the Lake County community in 2025, teacher Dmitry Kostyunin received a life sentence for sustained sexual abuse of a student spanning 6 years, from when the victim was just 12 years old. Kostyunin's methodical grooming included gradually introducing the minor to cannabis, which prosecutors demonstrated was used to lower inhibitions and create chemical dependency alongside the emotional manipulation. Court records revealed how Kostyunin isolated his victim through a calculated campaign of emotional manipulation, convincing the child that their special relationship was normal while systematically cutting them off from supportive peer relationships. During the trial, digital evidence revealed thousands of text messages showing Kostyunin's psychological tactics, alternating between loving support and subtle threats. This represents the most comprehensive and systematic grooming strategy I've encountered in 20 years prosecuting these cases, stated the district attorney. Perhaps most disturbing was evidence that Kostyunin had researched child psychology specifically to exploit developmental vulnerabilities in his victim. The presiding judge, in delivering the life sentence, noted that Kostyunin showed no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught, and classified him as an ongoing danger to any community with children. What's most chilling is the evidence suggesting this wasn't his first victim, just the first to come forward. How many others suffer in silence, convinced by their abusers that no one would believe or help them? Wisconsin teacher Madison Bergman faced what amounted to a 178-year prison sentence after being convicted on 10 counts related to child sexual assault and enticement of an 11-year-old student. What distinguished this already disturbing case was the sheer volume of contact. Investigators uncovered more than 33,000 text messages exchanged with the child over just 7 months, revealing an escalating pattern of emotional manipulation and sexual grooming. Digital forensics experts testified that during peak periods, Bergman was sending messages almost hourly, creating a psychological bubble that isolated the child from normal social development. Court evidence showed how she systematically introduced sexual content, beginning with seemingly innocent comments before escalating to explicit conversations and eventually physical contact. She created an alternative reality for this child where this relationship was normal and special, explained the prosecutor. Particularly damning was evidence that Bergman had researched psychological manipulation techniques and had previously been warned about boundary violations at another school district. The judge, in delivering the unprecedented sentence, cited Bergman's complete lack of remorse and high likelihood of reoffending based on psychological evaluations. One expert witness testified that the extraordinary number of messages represented one of the most comprehensive grooming campaigns documented in educational settings. How many other children are currently trapped in similar webs of manipulation, believing inappropriate attention from an adult represents special caring rather than calculated exploitation? In a case that defies comprehension, Indiana teacher Brittany Fortenberry was sentenced to what amounts to 262 years in prison after being convicted on 29 counts related to the sexual assault of multiple 13-year-old students. What distinguished this already horrific case was its theatrical element. Fortenberry forced victims to wear scream masks during group encounters she orchestrated, creating an atmosphere of psychological terror alongside physical abuse. Court documents revealed how she carefully selected vulnerable students, offering special attention and privileges before gradually introducing inappropriate contact. A search of her home uncovered disturbing journals detailing her fantasies and plans, along with the infamous masks used during the assaults. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Fortenberry had researched online about age of consent laws and how to avoid detection. She wasn't just breaking the law, she was creating elaborately staged traumatic experiences these children will never forget, stated the prosecutor during closing arguments. When victims finally came forward, they described feelings of confusion, shame, and fear, emotions Fortenberry had weaponized to maintain their silence. The judge, in delivering the unprecedented sentence, called the case among the most disturbing examples of trust violation this court has ever encountered. What twisted psychology drives someone to not only commit abuse, but choreograph it with elements of horror? For nearly 7 years, between 1994 and 2001, Paul Gear taught at elementary schools in Hancock County, presenting the image of a dedicated educator while systematically abusing his position to sexually assault multiple young students. What makes this case particularly haunting is how long Gear evaded justice. It wasn't until 2025, nearly a quarter century after his crimes, that his victims finally saw him sentenced to 50 years in prison. The investigation revealed a pattern of calculated grooming, with Gear targeting children from troubled homes who were less likely to report abuse or be believed. During the long-delayed trial, now adult victims delivered emotional testimony about lives derailed by trauma, failed relationships, substance abuse, and suicide attempts directly attributed to Gear's actions. One victim, now a parent themselves, stated, "He stole my childhood, and it took me 20 years to understand it wasn't my fault." Particularly disturbing was evidence that school administrators had dismissed early complaints as misunderstandings, allowing the abuse to continue. The prosecutor described the case as a perfect storm of institutional failure and predatory calculation. The judge, in delivering the maximum sentence, acknowledged it could never restore what was taken from the victims, but hoped it might offer some measure of closure to wounds that have festered for decades. How many other predators continue teaching today, protected by systems more concerned with reputation than children's safety? Behind Christopher Kenji, Benden's facade as a dedicated Baltimore teacher lurked a digital predator whose crimes extended far beyond classroom walls. In 2024, this seemingly respected educator was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison for an elaborate scheme of child sexual exploitation, possession of child pornography, and cyberstalking. Bendan meticulously created fake online identities to manipulate and exploit students, collecting explicit images through deception and blackmail. The investigation uncovered over 8,000 files of child sexual abuse material on his devices, organized in folders with victims' names. What shocked investigators most was Bendan's detailed journal documenting his conquests and strategies for gaining children's trust. He approached predation with the same methodical planning he brought to lesson plans, stated the lead FBI investigator. During sentencing, the judge noted that Bendan had deliberately sought employment at schools with vulnerable populations, calling his actions a calculated campaign of exploitation disguised as mentorship. One victim's statement read during court proceedings revealed the devastating psychological impact. "I can't trust anyone anymore. Every time someone is nice to me, I wonder what they really want." How could someone so methodically orchestrate such elaborate abuse while maintaining a professional reputation that fooled colleagues, parents, and administrators alike? Trusted Michigan teacher Heather Hare was sentenced to 13 years in federal prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release after being convicted of engaging in sexual activities with a minor student. What elevated this case to federal jurisdiction was Hare's deliberate transportation of the victim across state lines to continue the abuse. A calculated move, prosecutors argued, demonstrated clear awareness of wrongdoing. Court evidence revealed Hare engaged in sexual activities with the student between 20 and 30 times, including in her classroom after school hours. Digital forensics uncovered over 4,000 text messages between Hare and her victim, many containing explicit content and psychological manipulation. She consistently framed her actions as protecting and special attention while systematically dismantling appropriate boundaries, noted the FBI agent who led the investigation. During sentencing, the judge highlighted testimony from school counselors about the profound psychological impact on the victim, whose academic performance plummeted and who developed severe trust issues requiring intensive therapy. In a particularly disturbing revelation, evidence suggested Hare had researched age of consent laws in neighboring states before planning trips with the student. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained campaign of calculated exploitation, stated the prosecutor in closing arguments. How could someone sworn to educate and protect children instead use their psychological training to exploit them? In a case that sent shockwaves through the Hateville community, school coach Jamarcus Collins received a life sentence in 2023 for the systematic sexual assault, battery, and molestation of multiple female students between the ages of 12 and 14. Collins, who coached girls' athletics, methodically exploited his position of authority to isolate vulnerable students under the guise of special training sessions. Court testimony revealed how Collins used his status as a respected coach to silence victims, convincing them that reporting would end their athletic aspirations. The investigation uncovered a pattern spanning years, with Collins carefully selecting victims who lacked strong parental support, or who particularly craved adult approval. He didn't just violate their bodies, he weaponized their dreams against them, stated the prosecutor during closing arguments. Particularly damning was testimony from school administrators who admitted ignoring early warning signs, including Collins' pattern of being alone with students despite policy prohibitions. One victim, speaking at sentencing, described how, "He made me believe this was the price of success, that all serious athletes had coaches who trained them this way." The judge, in delivering the life sentence, called Collins a predator who deliberately sought positions giving him access to vulnerable children. How many other coaches are exploiting the intense trust relationships of sports to groom and abuse young athletes whose dreams they are supposed to nurture? In one of the most shocking cases of betrayal, San Diego's former Teacher of the Year, Jacqueline Ma, was sentenced to 30 years in prison after pleading guilty to sexually abusing multiple students ages 11 and 12. Ma, who had been celebrated for her teaching excellence just months before her arrest, used her sterling reputation to deflect suspicion while systematically grooming and abusing children in her care. Court evidence revealed Ma had given victims special gifts, created elaborate coded communication systems to avoid detection, and convinced children their relationship was special and secret. Particularly disturbing was evidence that Ma had obtained a tattoo containing one victim's initials and had created a countdown calendar to the child's 18th birthday. This level of obsession and calculation demonstrates the extreme danger she posed, stated the prosecutor. During the investigation, authorities discovered Ma had researched how to permanently delete text messages and avoid digital evidence collection. One parent's victim impact statement described the devastating realization: "We celebrated when she won Teacher of the Year. We thanked her for taking special interest in our child. We were thanking the person who was destroying our family." The judge, in accepting Ma's guilty plea, noted that her previously stellar reputation actually made her crimes all the more insidious, as it created the perfect cover for abuse. What does it say about our systems when those we celebrate as educational paragons are secretly exploiting the very children we've honored them for teaching? In a case that shocked Tennessee communities, middle school teacher Alyssa McCommon was sentenced to 25 years in prison, without possibility of parole for the rape of her 12-year-old student. What began as special attention toward a vulnerable boy escalated into a calculated pattern of exploitation that culminated in McCommon becoming pregnant with the child's baby. During hearings, prosecutors revealed hundreds of text messages where McCommon manipulated the boy with phrases like, "This is what people do when they love each other." The victim's parents discovered the abuse only after noticing dramatic behavioral changes in their son, including withdrawal from friends and falling grades. In a heart-wrenching victim impact statement, the boy's mother said, "You stole my son's childhood and replaced it with trauma he'll carry forever." McCommon eventually pleaded guilty, though she initially attempted to frame the relationship as mutual and misunderstood, a claim the judge condemned as a disturbing distortion that exemplifies why these laws exist in the first place. The case highlighted how female predators often escape early detection due to societal misconceptions about who can commit abuse. How many warning signs were missed because we failed to recognize that predators don't fit a single profile? Stefan Zappe presented himself as a dedicated elementary school teacher at a Department of Defense school in Stuttgart, Germany. Between 2006 and 2010, this trusted educator methodically exploited his position to commit unspeakable acts against 4 young female students aged just 6 to 8 years old. Using his authority and the inherent trust children place in their teachers, Zappe systematically isolated and abused these vulnerable young girls within the very classroom where they should have felt safe. What makes this case particularly chilling is how he maintained a sterling reputation among colleagues while committing these heinous acts. During his 2023 trial, one prosecutor described his predatory pattern as calculated grooming disguised as mentorship. The court heard heart-wrenching testimony from victims, now young women, detailing how the trauma had followed them for over a decade. Zappe's emotionless demeanor throughout proceedings stunned observers, with one court reporter noting he appeared more concerned with his own discomfort than the suffering he'd caused. The judge delivered the maximum sentence possible, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. How could someone entrusted with the care of military families' children commit such a profound betrayal of trust? In each of these devastating cases, we witness a profound betrayal of the sacred trust between educator and student. The classroom, designed as a sanctuary for growth and learning, became a hunting ground where authority was weaponized against the innocent. While these stories are difficult to confront, acknowledging them is essential to creating safer educational environments. What systemic changes might prevent future predators from exploiting positions of trust? Could improved screening, monitoring, or reporting mechanisms have spared these victims? Share your thoughts in the comments below on how we can better protect students while preserving the positive mentor relationships that define quality education. If this exploration of educational system failures has provided valuable insights, please consider subscribing and liking this video to help raise awareness about these critical issues.